That's right. You heard the whistle, and it is that time again. It is time to break down the latest action in football with my good friend. He is the man, the myth, the legend behind the Fantasy Football Paydirt podcast. This weekend, we're previewing the AFC and NFC championship game to head to the Super Bowl in Minneapolis. It is my good friend, Tyler Baker. Great to have you back on the show.
Hey, thanks, my friend. It's good to see you again. Good to be
All
back
right,
on.
indeed. And as I told you, I've got the new streamlined hairdo, at least for now. I met a lawnmower I didn't like, and I'll tell you what, I am ready to go for this week's action in the NFL. I don't know if everybody else is, and we'll talk about that coming up soon. But before we get into the action and talk about all the great things going on this weekend, you got to share with me why people have to check out the Fantasy Football Paydirt podcast.
Well, during fantasy football season, there are a lot of decisions to make. There are a lot of factors involved. And what we do is we use our experience and we just help people make better decisions. You have to be informed. We have a couple outlets that we watch pretty closely, a couple guys on Twitter that have proven to bring you the truth about what's going on, or at least as much as we're able to know being on the outside of these teams. And so at the Fantasy Football Paydirt podcast, we just help people make informed decisions. We have a great Facebook group that during the fantasy football season, you can come on and you can ask your questions, and a couple of us will get on there and chime in and give you our opinion. But we don't want to make decisions for anybody, but we just want people to make better decisions. And that usually means taking experience. And we've all been playing fantasy football for decade plus. The experience plus with the information that we know, and using those two things to help people make better decisions. We're not going to make decisions for you, but we'll steer you in the best direction that we can.
Sounds great indeed. And you can also check it out on their Fantasy Football Paydirt podcast Facebook group. And you'll meet a lot of other people like yourself that are truly into football and will help you once fantasy football season comes back to make the right decisions in your draft and during the season as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a great it's going to be a great weekend. Like I said earlier, the AFC and NFC championship game. I'll tell you what, everything was just going along well. We had some nice matchups, but wouldn't you know, something gets thrown out of left field, or something gets injured when it comes to out of left field. And we'll start off with the Jacksonville New England matchup with somebody hurt their widow hand, and it looks like it's some nervous time going on in Beantown.
Sure. So Tom Brady, the Tom Brady, hurt his hand in practice. He was throwing his hand hit another player. Now, quarterbacks during practice, they wear the red non-contact jersey, but it looks like it was just an extension of him throwing that he made contact with a teammate, hurt his hand. Normally this wouldn't be a big deal, but Tom Brady did go in on Wednesday for x-rays. So that tells me that it's big enough of a deal that they're x-raying it just to make sure that there's no structural damage. There was some swelling. Tom Brady on Thursday was at practice. He was on the field for the stretching portion, but he didn't actually participate in practice. I think that's just a precautionary measure. I'm not too concerned about it. Tom Brady is going to be starting his 12th AFC championship game. I'm not too concerned about the hand. Now, Tom Brady also went through most of the year being on the injury report as having a bad knee. His knee never affected his playing. I think the x-ray, it looks like the x-ray was just precautionary, but for it to be serious enough for him to get x-rays, it shows that there's an actual problem with a team, the New England Patriots, that likes to do smoke and mirrors with their injury report. We know that there's a real problem, but again, this is a guy that's been there before. This is, again, his 12th AFC championship. I'm not that concerned with Tom Brady this weekend.
What I am concerned what you should be concerned with if you're a New England Patriots fan is the Jacksonville defense, which, well, last week aside, is one of the strongest defenses of the last few years.
Absolutely. Now, their defense is a little banged up. Their free safety, Tashawn Gibson, he did not practice, not sure yet if he's going to play. And their strong safety, Barry Church, was limited in Thursday in practice. We'll have to see the Friday practice report to tell us a little bit of a clear story. But what that's painting for me is a picture where Rob Gronkowski, who is probably the most dangerous weapon and Tom Brady's favorite weapon, now he's going up against a really good defense with banged up safeties. So that's a pretty big deal. It'll be interesting to see who plays on Jacksonville. If their free safety can't go, they could just put one of their speedy linebackers on Gronk one-on-one, shadow him the whole game. But of course, it's the Patriots. So even if you take Gronk out of the equation, they have plenty of other ways that they can beat you. Looks like Rex Burkhead is back. He practiced on a limited basis, but he's expected to play. And also Mike Gillislee has been practicing as well. So there are a lot of weapons that New England can use. But every team that has had success against New England, it's because they've been able to put pressure on Tom Brady. And I think that's going to be priority number one for Jacksonville, is getting pressure on Brady, hoping maybe that his hand will be making throws uncomfortable for him. So this is going to be a really good game. Jacksonville is a for-real defense with fast, good players all along that defense. So even though looking at it, it's the Patriots against the Jaguars, I think it's going to be a little bit of a better game than people think it's going to be, because Jacksonville just beat Pittsburgh last week, and nobody expected that. I didn't expect that. But Pittsburgh came out flat.
Well, I'll end our thoughts on the AFC Championship with this question to you. And I think this is the most important question of the entire championship weekend. Do you think Blake Bortles is a good enough quarterback to get the team to the Super Bowl? To get his team to the Super Bowl?
I think Leonard Fournette is a good enough running back that Blake Bortles doesn't have to throw it a lot. And Jackson,
well, not if he gets hit in the back by Pittsburgh
fans. Sure, I know. Yeah, that's the question. And what we've seen statistically is that Blake Bortles has been playing well. And by playing well, I mean he hasn't thrown interceptions. When he doesn't give the ball away, Jacksonville wins games. So when
you're only throwing for 80 yards, however, you're not throwing many passes and thus are not throwing many interceptions. But at some point in time, in that game, New England's going to force him to make that pass.
And that's probably on Bill Belichick's to-do list is to get the ball out quickly, move downfield, score touchdowns. And then, of course, Jacksonville's probably going to counter with a lot of Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette is very good. He's very hard to stop. And as long as they don't ask Blake Bortles to win the game for them, I think that'll give them the best chance that they have to win.
Those are some great points indeed, coming from Tyler Baker of the Fantasy Football Patriot podcast. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe before next fantasy football season to catch all the latest news and information from the man himself, a man who, still has all of his red hair, coming from a man who has none of it left. So I just want to let you take it all, Tyler. Take it. This is what will become of you. Just to let you know, right around the corner, right here.
I've already got some popping out of my beard.
No. This is what happens to you. It all goes great really fast with us redheads. But I won't go there. That as it may. There's another championship game, and It's not a consolation at all. Mm-hmm. But I want to ask you this. If at the beginning of the season I told you that Nick Foles versus Case Keenum would be the matchup of quarterbacks in the NFC Championship game, I hear you laughing now, so I probably wouldn't know your answer. What would you have said? Would you have said I was actually, would you actually have said I would be in need of a drug test?
I would have probably sought out a different pop culture show to be on. if those were your thoughts at the beginning of the season, I probably would have suggested sobriety.
But after that miracle play, and I'll tell you what, that was a miracle play, and a really just, I feel so bad for the New Orleans Saints safety who, you got to feel terrible for him. But after that miracle play by Minnesota, they are now in the NFC Championship game against Philadelphia. What do you see in this matchup? Because like I said, these were not the two quarterbacks that started out the season for these teams. But in at least one case, it is a quarterback who's actually really done a spectacular job in getting their team to the championship game.
Absolutely. If you want to be a successful football team, you have to have depth. You have to. And it happens with a lot of teams every year. They look really good, and then they lose one of those key players, and they just can't recuperate from that. Especially at quarterback. You very, very rarely see the starting quarterback on a good team go down and that team continue to be good. Well, we have two instances of it right now with the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles, which makes this game so difficult to kind of project. Like, it's just going to be very difficult. Now, Case Keenum has been playing quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings for a while. That team trusts him. That team has won with him. You can't say that for Nick Foles. Nick Foles has been thrown in there for a month now, and I don't think that that's enough time to really build trust and chemistry within a locker room that will take you over the edge. So if I had a favorite in this game, it would have to be Minnesota's defense. They have the best defense in the league. And we're finding out with Jacksonville that, and it's something my grandfather always told me. My grandfather always told me that defenses win championships. And what we're seeing right now is 3 out of these 4 teams that are in the conference championships have really good defenses. Philadelphia's defense, I think, is a little underrated, but anybody who watches football closely knows that they're a good defense. Minnesota's the #1 defense in the league, and of course, we all know that Jacksonville has a great defense. So what we're seeing on the NFC side of it is 2 really good defensive teams that have made it to this point because of their defense, and it's going to be very interesting how these teams go at each other. It's going to be difficult. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of number 3 and number 4 receivers be an impact. But other than that, this is one of those games where I'm just going to sit back and watch it and enjoy it. I don't know if I can give too much insight as to what these teams' game plans are, but I think this is going to be a good game to watch.
The last thing I want to say in regards to that is Philadelphia could have a potential plus in their running back situation if they don't want to lean on Nick Foles. Talk to me a little bit about how that's been a missing element in the past couple weeks, but something that could come around in the NFC Championship game.
You mean for Philadelphia's running game? Yeah, they have. Well, when they picked up Jay Ajayi, that was a very, very big deal because they had kind of the scat back and Clement, and then they had LeGarrette Blount, who is really good at just wearing a defense down, but you usually don't see a lot of those explosive plays, those game-changing plays. You don't see those from LeGarrette Blount. He's just not that guy anymore. Jay Ajayi brought that to this offense. Jay Ajayi can get the ball and flat out take off. And so they are set up so that they can wear down that Vikings defense. But that Vikings defense is not the best in the league for nothing. And so Philadelphia is going to have to mix it up. They're going to have to get Zach Ertz involved, and that's going to be difficult when he's going up against guys like Harrison and they're just some really good players in that Vikings secondary, which is why I think you're probably going to see like at Nelson Aguilar manage to squeak around and get open. If they could take advantage of Torrey Smith's speed, that could help them out a lot as well. So there are ways to attack Minnesota, but they're going to have a really good game plan. And all of the Philadelphia fans that I know really, really like Doug Peterson, and they really like what he's doing in Philadelphia. This is an opportunity to go up with your second string quarterback up against the defense's best or the league's best defense and show that you're a coach that can win. So there's definitely an opportunity here. I think that running game is gonna be a big impact, because when you can when you can wear down the defense with two bigger guys, because Jay Ajayi is a pretty big guy too. So I think if they go out and they pound the ball and work in some play action, yeah, Philadelphia definitely has a chance.
One last thing before we head on out. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts after a probably will be a grueling weekend in the NFL with two most likely great games coming up in the AFC and NFC Championship. Who comes out on top and who will be going to the Super Bowl after this weekend is done?
Man, that's tough. I'm pretty sure the Pats are going to get past the Jaguars. But I mean, this Eagles-Minnesota game, I think it's going to be a fun one to watch. If I have a favorite in it, I got to go with Minnesota. Just the way that Case Keenum has really been clutch for them, and having the best defense in the league, I think definitely gives them advantage over a Philadelphia team that is good. I mean, they're a very good team, but I think Case Keenum has a little bit more of that mojo than Nick Foles does. So if I'm calling this Super Bowl, I'm saying it's the Pats and the Vikings, and you have to give the nod to the Pats. I would like to see the Vikings win it all, but the Patriots have been here before. They understand what it's like to play under the pressure of a conference championship and a Super Bowl. That experiences are invaluable when preparing yourself to play in these big games. And the Pats have made a routine of making it to these big games. So you have to give them the advantage.
Well, we'll definitely reach out to you again before the actual big game, because you don't want to say Super Bowl. The NFL might get mad and might want to charge you.
Yeah.
But you only say the big game. But we'll reach out to you before the big game to get your final thoughts and see if anything changes and see actually who comes out on top after the AFC and NFC Championship, and who your pick actually will end up being in the Super Bowl. Might change. You never know.
Yeah.
All it takes is one hand injury away. But
this is
be
true.
that as it may, Tyler, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the Pop Culture Cosmos and the PCC Multiverse, as always, over the course of this past season. You want to check out Tyler Baker's all of his great stuff going on with the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt podcast and also the Facebook group Fantasy Football Pay Dirt podcast. Tyler, as always, it's a great pleasure having you part of the PCC Multiverse.
Thank you, Gerald. Look forward to next time.
All right. As always, my friend, it's great indeed to have you part of the PCC Multiverse.